right, back at it today. Jim and Lucas, we're here running our next episode of Athlete Builder. We are blessed to have Ewell Gordon online today. A few things about Ewell before we get into a whole bunch of questions. Looking forward to it. So, Ewell, first, thanks for being here. A few things about him. He just told me he has me by a decade, which you wouldn't know from his profile picture because looks a lot younger than that. Background, he got his 20. He did 18 years with the U.S. Army. He ended up as a captain. And then finished that in 2004, all along the way. And then after then, pumped in a ton of schooling where finishes his bachelor's, then gets his master's in sports medicine, PhD in psychology with performance enhancement as his focus. So all along the way has been working with athletes in college, played at a small school in Missouri, two-sport athlete, track and football. So he was fast on the field and on the track. He has the background as an athlete. Being in the military, there's obviously an athletic component there. And then since then, pumped in a bunch of nerd work, which we like. We want smarter people. So he's one of the smart ones with his PhD. Since then, he started his podcast in 2016, really kind of launched in 2017. It's 150, 175 episodes in, called Performance Talk Podcast. The next year, he starts Ground Level 4, which is an online business, but also has a gym component. He's down in Texas. I wrote down, is it New Braunfels, northeast of San Antonio?
New Braunfels.
Okay, so lucky to have him on the show. Big background, works with athletes, gets athletes a lot better. And when I looked at his profile and his approach, I would say the word collaborator, because he's working with the athletes, sometimes with parents because the kids are minors. They'll collaborate with the coaches online as well. So sometimes you'll work with people and their ego gets in the way and they're like, hey, it's got to be this way. This is my way, is the only way. And just from what I've gathered and worked with him before on a prior show, he adapts well and is malleable, and it's not a one-size-fits-all. He tailors it to what the athlete needs. So, Ewell, thank you for being on the show today. So glad to have you.
Jim, you guys, both of you, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to come on and talk shop. It's a little bit different being on the other side of the mic, but I enjoy talking about it with people who are passionate about it. So, hey, that's what we do.
Awesome. Man, thank you. Talking about just playing as an athlete first, why football and track? Well, what brought you to those?
Well, and as a youngster, man, I was in love with football, and the town where I grew up had a rich history in the sport, and all football players ran track. In high school, I wasn't one of the guys that you would look at and go, man, that dude is fast. He can run, but mostly because running was a way to play football for me is how I got into track. So I was a hurdler in high school. Decent, but more than anything else, it was the camaraderie with the teammates, and we had excellent coaches, both track and football. So that's how I got into track. Football was just everybody played, and I played from Pop Warner or what they call Pop Warner, Little League, all the way through till they just wouldn't let me put a strap on the pads anymore and play. I was okay. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I was some wonder kid at the game, but I enjoyed it. I thought I was a great teammate. I thought I was fairly smart at the game, and I worked at it. It's how I got into weight training, and starting to work with the weights, because I wasn't a big guy. I'm still not a big guy. So, being, we're going to call it 5'6". That's what we're going to call it. But being 5'6" and light in high school, and 185, 190 pounds. So I wasn't what you call small, just diminutive in stature.
Hurdler's more for a taller man's game as well. So I like the
Yeah.
hurdle. My son ran hurdles, and I like it because you're running under duress, and in football you're under duress as well. So it kind of helps with that component a little bit. Did you like track better, or worse, or same, or something similar?
Uh, I I I grew to love track when I got to college. Mainly because I seen what it did to me as a sprinter. I became a much better sprinter in college, and was on a couple of conference championship relay teams, and and ran the 100, 200, mostly the shorter sprints. But I like track, but I love football.
There it is. Got it. Okay. And then, so was it right from college to OCS?
That's my dog, man. I'm sorry about that. He's right behind me somewhere. Sit down. Sorry about that. But no, actually, it was I got out and I coached. I went back to my old high school and did a little coaching there. Um, it was more, trying to get out and get that first job. There was no such thing as exercise science back then. There was no such thing as strength and conditioning. The National Association hadn't even stood up, by that time. It was 2 or 3 years later when it finally stood up.
Mm,
Uh, so, so getting into that was more knowing what preparation was required, knowing what I had to go through just to be able to get on the field, and it wasn't anything that was any more or less than any other athlete, but it was the time. Back then, not a lot of people were lifting weights. Not a lot of people were, you know, going to the what we call performance now, but strength conditioning or preparation in any sport, and much less football. In some areas back then, the weight room was considered taboo. Don't do that because you're going to get too bulky and you're not going to be able to move and those kind of things. But it was it suited me well and it served me well. Put it that way.
gotcha. So when did you decide to enlist then?
When I realized, I was coaching there in my hometown, and jobs were jobs. It's like when you're starting off,
Yep.
wasn't a lot of internships like there are today where I could go study and do stuff like that. Had some went back with those coaches that I had in high school, and they were real good, man. They were real good to me and to my thought process. But I had a family. I just
Mm-hmm.
started a new family, and I needed regular work. So while they were trying to help me get into the profession of coaching, um, I needed to feed a child right now, so I enlisted in the Army.
Okay. Awesome. What year was that?
That was why I actually signed my paperwork in late '86, and then '87 I went in November. Let me get it right. November '87, '88, somewhere around there. I enlisted, and it was off to Fort Benning and to become an infantryman.
Infantryman. So went right to boot camp, and then was it right after that right to OCS because you already had a college degree or no?
Well, that was the plan, but that's not the way it worked out. Uh, the plan was to do that, go straight to OCS. My paperwork was accepted, but coming out of basic training, I don't know what happened. Doesn't really matter. Um, but the paperwork wasn't available, and so I didn't get a class date. So I was given a duty station, and off I went to Germany.
Oh wow, Germany. Okay, so then the whole family comes with you then?
Not right away, but eventually they got over there. And we were over there for 4.5 years, up until the Gulf War. And of course, I deployed. The family stayed there in Germany,
Mm-hmm.
and had some rough luck with that deployment, and came away with some with some things and spent some time in the hospital. And, that's when I realized the real value of everything I had done exercise wise previous to that. As we won't really get into to everything that was going on and what happened, but let's just say I had to relearn to walk
Hmm.
and some things like that from my circumstances. And I had probably 3 or 4 doctors tell me, "Hey, look, if you weren't built the way you're built and have done the things you've done, I don't know that you would walk without a walker or a cane the rest of your life." But we didn't do that. So,
Hmm. You know, that's so prevalent and so many people ignore that. I have like 2 scenarios. One, I'm used to work in banking for a while, and one of my coworkers' his name was Sam, and great dude, always in shape. He ran running back at Syracuse, and this was just after the Jim Brown, Ernie Davis was running there, so a little bit after that. So he's always been a lifter in shape, and he was a bit older than me, so he's probably 50 at the time when this happened. He got real sick and got pneumonia, went to the hospital,
right.
and like just kept getting worse and worse. A lot of fluid in the lungs, and finally he just gets through it. And he's talking to the doc, and the doc's like, "Man, if you weren't in such great shape, you really would have been suffering here, and I really would have kind of questioned things, you know." So that's one component or example, just kind of echoes what you just said. And then there's my own mother, where she's in her 70s, right? And she's always been thin. And so if you're really thin and when you get sick, then you could be kind of in trouble because you need kind of some
Right.
muscle mass and some fat to kind of
Right.
carry you through the illness. So she's been working diligently, to just eat more protein and put on a little bit of muscle, doing some more resistance training because she's trying to build it up. So just to stay alive, a lot of times, being in shape can be a game changer, let
Yeah.
alone being a game changer, obviously, as an athlete. And when you're deployed on duty, being, in shape and strong is important. So, let me ask you this. Obviously, there's pain and discomfort when you're injured like that, and they're talking about walking with a cane. And I wouldn't wish it upon anybody, and it sucks, right? It just sucks. However, would you say that there were a lot of lessons that you learned from that challenge and obstacle that help fortify and build you, and you build your mental state, and you can refer back to it when you're in a tough time, and also when you're dealing with other folks?
Here's a big thing for me. What that period of my life did for me is first, when I first entered rehab, I was there, and they were real. Back then there was a time they were real patient centric, but it was a passive kind of thing with rehabilitation. It was go slow, don't do this, don't do that, take your time. And I was already aggressive. Not only was I aggressive by personality and because I played collegiate sports, but I was also aggressive because of what how the Army continued to build me and what they made me what they made me. So I was not um content to sit and wait to do the same thing for 2 or 3 weeks without pushing through
Mm-hmm.
or without challenging myself a little bit more. I remember one time in I'm talking to the physical therapist, and the doctor was in there, and they were saying, you're going to be here. It's going to be a while. You just need to take your time and this and that. And I'm probably used a couple of expletives, but I said, hell with that.
Right.
I said, go get me these things, and I promise you I'll be walking in a week. Well, they went and got me some ankle weights and some dumbbells and some other things, and I did what they told me to do in rehab, but I also did what I knew from a little bit of my education and some other things that would help me get back to where I needed to be. And I started doing those things. And within a week, it's maybe 10 days. I might be exaggerating a little bit, but maybe let's say real soon after that, I was walking. Now, was I real steady? No. But getting to the walking stage allowed me to start building more strength and to continue to develop on a pathway that was um, more suitable to my mental makeup. Because had I been made to sit and continue to, okay, we're just going to stretch today, or we're just going to do this, I'd probably still be on the four prong walker, and somebody would be bringing me soup in a cup or something. I don't know,
Right.
but that wasn't who I was, and that's not who I am. And I don't know if I told you when you were on with us, Jim, but I was also, when I got down to Texas in 2018, I was in a car wreck.
Mm.
Well, let's put it this way. I had a cement truck. I later learned that it was fully loaded. Hit me head on in my F-150 with my trailer on the back. I had just arrived in Texas.
Dang.
And the next thing I knew, I'm in the hospital. My back's broken, my arm's broken, my knees messed up, and I flashed back to that same time in the military where I'm in the hospital and they're telling me, you can expect these things, and you can expect, you're going to have trouble walking and doing all these things. And I didn't. And when I seen the rehab doctor, I was in rehab. They said, well, we got you down here for about 14 to 21 days. I said, I'll be out in 7.
Mm.
7 days I walked out of there because same kind of instance. They wanted to start me off with these, 3-pound weights and all this stuff. I said, look, we can go through the motions, or we can get better. And I'm sure I told them I was going to rappel out the window in 7 days, whether they were going to let me out or not. So I said, I'm leaving in 7 days, whether you say I can or not. But, it's the same kind of thing. And the young man that worked with me and the physicians up there were great. And they said, look, we have found out a little bit about your background. And if you think we need to be doing something and you think you can handle it, let's do it. So, after back surgery and after that first little bit, 2 or 3 days where, I was just trying to get up and down, I said, let's go. And we started, and 7 days, actually it was 8 days, because the 7th day was a Sunday and nobody was working. So I couldn't get checked out. So I left the next morning on a Monday, and my mom was up there with me, and she said, you're being a little hard on them, aren't you? I said, nah, Mom. I said they're treating me right, but they're going to take it easy on me unless I open the door for getting pushed. And if I don't get pushed, I said, I'm going to sit up here. And I said, somebody's going to be serving me breakfast every morning. And that's not the way I want to live. So that was the second instance that, for me, a lifetime of exercise and resistance training specifically paid big dividends in real life and not just in sports.
Mm-hmm. There's a number of lessons I take from both those stories right from the get-go. And one of them is that, they make boot camp challenging so that you can have a reference point to say, hey, I can handle some challenging crap. I can handle this next task.
Right.
They build your confidence, because confidence comes from reps. So then you have this confidence built from that getting injured while on deployment, right? And so you have the confidence from those prior reps. So when we're training athletes, sometimes I'll say, hey, this next piece, we're done training. This doesn't necessarily get you a whole lot better physically. There's not a lot getting you better when you're lunging 200 meters or 400 meters, right? Maybe some muscle endurance, core endurance, right? They'll say, well, why are we doing this? I said, well, sometimes we need some reference points, and we need to challenge ourselves so that when it's painful, we keep going. And when it's painful, there's still a way to compete either with yourself or against an obstacle or an affliction or with your or against some type of opposition. Like
Right.
everyone's in pain in the fourth quarter. Everyone's tired in that third round on the wrestling mat, right?
Yeah.
So having that reference point is going to be huge in life. So the more you can seek some level of discomfort every once in a while, the less you give a shit about discomfort. You're like, hey man, I'm ready to go. I've handled pain before. Let's keep going.
The understanding when you're hurt and when it's real pain.
Sure.
There's if you're experiencing discomfort and you're experiencing challenge, and if it's not a physiological challenge like a stroke or a heart attack or something like that, and you're in the weight room or you're out on the field, you have to it helps to have a reference point to know that you've gotten through it. And one of the things that always helped me was that, hey, there's a whole bunch of people that have done this before me, and if they can do it, why can't I do it?
Right.
So that reference point, like you said, critical in life, yes, but in what we do as a profession in sport, understanding that you can't train for everything, but you can train for most things. So when the thing that you didn't train for pops up, it's just another challenge. So when it's the fourth quarter and you're in a hurry up offense and the coach looks at you and he says you need to come out, yes or no. It's okay to admit if you're tired, but do you need to come out? No, not at all. Not I don't know.
Right.
Not if you're me. My reps, my reps in high school and college, except if you take out my senior years when I was actually a starter, my reps were, I played and I played during significant times, but there were guys in front of me who were good. I never let, I prepared like I was going to start every game, that I was going to be in for every play. I didn't prepare, well, I'm only going to go in for 15 plays this game, or I'm only returning kicks this game, or whatever. Didn't prepare like that. I prepared like, hey, I'm playing every game. And if the starter had to come out, they weren't going to lose much by putting me in. That's the way I approached my athletic career. I was a wrestler in high school. You mentioned that earlier. And there are a few matches where that third period got to be, a little long. And my coaches, my high school coaches, I would say somebody like me, they worked with me very well. And I learned a lot about working with different athletes and how to motivate different athletes at different times in their careers and when they had different roles. Some guys didn't have every down roles or every what I call, you're not the primary. You're the next guy up. But how are you going to prepare? Because if you're the next guy up and you prepared like you just put it this way, if you prepared like you were never going to play, you were never going to play.
That's right.
That's just the way that went. So
I'm just kind of curious about, you talked a little bit about it, but what are some of the things, like some of your self-talk, what are some of the things you talk about in your head when you're going through these surgeries or these tough times? What are some of these self-talk things that you tell yourself? Can you talk a little bit about that?
So let's back up. Let's back up a little bit on that. As a younger athlete before the military and before the physical incidences, I had prepared in such a way that I thought, let's just be for real, I thought I was bulletproof. There was nothing physical I couldn't do. But then when I was physically challenged, I had to draw on some of my some of the way I trained in order to get through some of the rehabilitation. Listen, when I ended up in the hospital, it was whoa, always me after the first deployment. It was whoa, why me? Why is this? Why is that? And I had a young man that was next to me in the hospital, and he had a serious injury, and he had got to the hospital before me, but he had a prosthetic, and he looked at me, and at the time I was a sergeant, and he was he may have been a sergeant too, but he looked at me and he said, "Hey, Sarge, come on, man." He said, "Look, you got both of yours," and that's all it took for me. Somebody else was going through it, and somebody else was making it making a positive experience out of something. He lost a leg, he lost a limb, so obviously, his life had changed. And here I was having the opportunity to maybe go through life, scarred, maybe beat up a little bit, maybe not, the same guy I was exactly, but I had all my body parts. So I wasn't gonna, my fellow combatant, I wasn't gonna disrespect his effort by not giving absolutely everything that I could. It was like a teammate. He was giving everything and more. So, hey, look, I was going to do that too. And that's kind of how I set that up in my mind. My self-talk was from then on, hey, look, if he can, I can. If he does, I will. And in that instance, it was more about the respecting of the other members of the armed forces that had gone through worse than me and given more than I had in my brain, that I wasn't going to let them down. And then there was my family, and then there was, the people that counted on me. This was all before OCS. This was all before going off to see if I was worthy enough to be an officer in our armed forces, which is a physical thing anyway to go through. So that's kind of how I went through it. And it was the same when I had the wreck, and I was in rehab. It was, I look back on those times and I was like, okay, what do I have to do? And the both the lessons that came out of both of those occurrences in my life, both way back in, 90, 91, 92, and back in 2018, was consistency and persistence.
Mm-hmm.
The same thing we try to teach the athletes we work with is, hey, look, you want to get stronger, you got to be consistent. You got to be here when we need you here. You can't miss. We can't schedule 12 training sessions and you make 7. That's not going to get it. You're not going to get where you need to be. We can't schedule, we can't put a goal out there that's 6 months away, but then you only get 3 months worth of training because you had this excuse or this to do or that to do, or you just wasn't feeling it that day. So that's kind of the way I set it up in my brain for me, and what I try to push to the athletes that I have now. Hey, look, be consistent. It's not going to be a great day every day. You're not going to you're not going to PR every day, and you're not going to be good at anything that I ask you to do initially. But when you get good at those things or you get better at those things, all I'm going to do is move the bar anyway.
Right.
So we're going to move the bar and it's going to get higher. So now you're going to have more. So it's kind of the way I set that up psychologically or mentally. It was just, hey, look, here it is. This is the challenge. You're either going to do it or you're not. And then the consequences, if you don't, are this, and the outcomes are this if you do.
When you hit that obstacle and things look kind of shitty, you're like, one of the first things you mentioned is that, well, I have a bit of gratitude. Hey, because you're buddy next to you is losing a limb, and you're like, hey, I got both. So if you start with a bit of gratitude when you're having those problems, it's going to change your mindset. It's going to soften it a little bit, so you're not as upset and angry and pissed, right? Nothing wrong to be focused and serious about things, but hey, man, it could be worse. Let's quit feeling sorry for ourselves and then move forward. And then this month in March, we have 6 core values, and one of them we were focused on is teamwork. And so what I hear from you is you have this guy sitting next to you as your teammate, and you have teammates on the field. You try not to let down. And then you have your family and kid, right? So when you have any kind of goal like, hey, I want to play and do well because I want the fame or I want the money, I want the notoriety, that's nice and all, and it could push you for a little while. But when you have a goal that's beyond you, you're doing it for your faith, or you're doing it for your family, or you're doing it because my grandparents are going to die in the next couple of years. They want to see me play, or I'm doing this so my kid can see me, persevere. When you have that goal that's beyond you, then there's real internal strength and power that can push you through some really big obstacles. And you start seeing people like really do some things. Hey, I'm out of here, in a week, 10 days, 2 weeks. And they said I'd be here a month. All right. They said I'm not going to walk again. Whatever. Here I am doing just fine. So having that goal that's beyond you, that team goal, it really pushes people further than they really think they can go, because now they must go. They must get this done. Not I could, or I'd like to, or I want to. I must do this, or I'm letting down the team. I can't feel that in my identity, in my core. So I'm going to push. I'm going to push a little bit better. So then you see real performance and real advancement that way. That's excellent. That's excellent.
Yeah, my one little tidbit from that. You say teammates. The young man that was next to me. Last I heard, he was doing great in life, and he persevered, and that warmed my heart. But one of the things that really got me when I first really started pushing to get back on my feet and walk again after the deployment was my daughter. I was up on the parallel bars. You know how you get on the parallel bars and
Sure.
your legs aren't doing what you want them to do or anything like that. And the first time I stood without holding on to the parallel bars, I got all the way to the end, and I see my daughter come around the corner, and she seen me, and she took off running. I let go of the bars, and I reached for her.
Right.
And that was now. She got about halfway there, and I was like, "Oh man, I don't know if I can catch her."
Right.
If she comes, we might both end up on the floor. But I was able to reach back and grab one bar and get her with one hand. But my instinct was to reach out for her.
Awesome.
And she didn't come to the hospital every day. That's not an environment for a youngster. So my boss's wife used to keep her when my wife came. But that's one of those things. You talk about teammates, and you talk about right now and what we're doing right now in this arena in performance. In the weight room is the first place you start to realize how much your teammates will sacrifice to win on the field, to be the best that they can be.
Sure.
And it's what we see as practitioners now in this profession. You recognize that athlete when you see them right now. You recognize them when they when not the guys that, not the loud one, usually not the loudest person in the room,
Right.
Usually maybe not even the best athlete in the room, but you watch them and you see how they go. They're helping other athletes. They're working with the younger athletes, or but then when they go to work, you see the intent, not necessarily always intensity, but the intent of what they're doing. If they're doing a mobility exercise, we all know mobility exercises, they don't look real impressive a lot of times. Usually you're not holding any weight. You're just kind of moving your body some kind of way. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But you can see the intent in their action, in those types of athletes. And those athletes right there are a joy to work with. And it's why I'll never retire. So I'll do this, until I can't.
I'm sure, Lucas, I run a gym that's, it's in the private sector. It's not like with a school. And Lou's got hundreds of kids running through his gym all day long, so cross country team, football team, right? You name it. So you see all shapes and sizes. You see all kinds, and there's those with the intent, and there's those that not so much. And you'll say to these folks, hey, these people are going to keep advancing. These other folks, you see them drift away. But you probably see that on a much grander scale, right, Lucas?
Oh yeah, especially where we're at now in our program, where when I first got there wasn't a lot of buy-in in the weight room, and there wasn't a lot of buy-in into bettering themselves as athletes and stuff. And now, 3 years in, we got guys that are, I tell a group of kids, I got a couple examples of some linemen that are freshmen and sophomores that are extremely bought in. I tell them, hey, here's a couple mobility exercises I want you to do before we start our lift. So make sure you get here early. Hey, come in here and do these exercises. And before I'm even in the weight room to start, they're already done. They're already halfway done with their exercises and stuff like that. You got kids staying after. You got guys that are stepping up that may have not been bought in when I first got here. Now you're seeing guys helping younger kids. You're seeing younger kids starting to develop much faster than those ones that weren't bought in. And you're just starting to see a culture change and a shift just by those kids really taking pride in what they're doing, and they're really buying into what you're coaching them to do, and setting goals for them, and showing that this stuff is going to help them. That's when you really start to see the changes, when those guys are doing those little things with maximum amount of intent. So, and no lineman wants to go in and do mobility work before their workout before.
It's like I had a talk with another strength and conditioning coach, and we were talking about the use of the warm up, right?
Yeah.
And if the warm up doesn't mean anything, and it's just a bunch of exercises you do before you lift or run, then you've wasted 15, 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
What are you teaching during your warm up?
Yeah.
What is the intent of your warm up? Yeah, to warm up. Yeah, well, okay.
Right.
But there's so many opportunities to teach right there.
Yeah.
And if you're not teaching, if you're not getting better during your warm up, then you kind of wasted a whole bunch of time. And I've been fortunate enough to have worked in some while I've always been a private practitioner, I've been able to work in some high schools and some colleges as a contractor and go in. And oftentimes the most gratified I've been in some great places, but the most gratified I've been is in the high schools or the small colleges that didn't have a program.
Yep.
And I'm kind of there to introduce them to what a program could be.
Right.
So I'm working with the coaches, I'm working with the athletes, and I'm talking to the athlete. Same time I'm taking off that hat and putting on another hat and talking to the coaches. Sometimes in the same 20 within the same 20 feet.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where you go, it's if you want to build a program, and Lucas, I'm sure you know this, if you want to build a program, the first thing that you have to do is care.
Oh yeah.
Because if you don't care about what you're doing for the athlete or for the coach, because you go in there, it's his team or her team. It's not your team. So you're a value-added proposition. So they brought you in because somehow or somewhere along the line, you convinced them that, hey, coach, I can help you out. And I don't want to take over your team. What I want to do is make it easier for you.
Right.
And if we can help the athletes get better, that gives you attention on the X's and O's in some other places. Or if you're a strength coach, it allows you to continue programming and and maybe you get some free time, because that doesn't come with a lot of strength coaches often. Maybe you get some free time that you know your wife and your young family or old family may appreciate, because those things are important too.
And it's when I first got to my job, and I'm not going to say I work in a um, a super nice place, I would say, but I work in an inner city school with inner city kids, and within the first, it took me every bit of 2.5, 3 years to really, of course, it's going to have to do with getting younger kids in, getting the freshmen and
Right.
the new groups in to kind of adapt to, the new standard. But once I got past those rough times, my first 6 months was brutal, very brutal. Nobody accepted me. Nobody, like, who's this guy? That kind of deal. But because when you work in a place that has a lot of high turnover when it comes to coaches or teachers or
Yeah.
anybody, and you get a person that stays and you're there coaching,
They realize you care.
yeah, and that is that. And I'll tell you this, where I'm at. Like, I think I got the most. I would say loyal, or the most. They will do anything for you once you get there, and
It I've told and I've told multiple young professionals exactly what I've said here. If you care, everything else will fall into place. You've been educated, you know what you're doing, all that stuff has prepared you to do the job that you have. Now you have to care about
yeah,
it. Now you have to go in, and if you care about it, it doesn't matter if you have the biggest weight room or the shiniest weight room or the newest weight room. None of that matters. We, all three of us, know that we can get ready to play, and we can do resistance and strength training without a barbell, a machine, or a dumbbell.
Mm-hmm.
right,
But there are multiple ways to get to where you want to go. Multiple right ways. There's multiple right approaches, multiple paths, but there's only one direction. You have to be going that way.
Right.
You have to be wanting to improve. You know what I mean? And improve in a sense that you're there for the athlete and the people that you're supporting.
I'll talk to my athletes and I'll say, hey, I'm looking for a couple things here as you're lifting or training or sprinting. I'm looking for mistakes so I can correct them. That's pretty easy to look for, right? I'm just looking to make some tactical changes. But then I'm looking for potential. Can you potentially lift faster? Can you move faster? Can you lift heavier? And when I see that, and I've seen enough reps, I can say by the speed of what's going on, I know that there's more potential. There's more in the tank. So I'm going to ask you to do more. And then I'll sometimes get some pushback. I don't want to do that. I don't think I can. I don't know. I said, one, I'm most likely not putting you in a position to fail, right? Really, I'm really not.
Yeah.
Because I want you to have confidence in me. So as long as you believe, we're going to be fine. And I might get still some more pushback, and I say, hey, is anyone else going to walk up to you today, or at least in this moment, and care enough to say, hey, there's more for you to grow here, and ask you to do it? Because if I cared less, I would say, okay, see you later. I'll go on to the next person. But I'm going to care enough to say, and not argue, but build a case here that, hey, there's more here, so let's go. Let's get it, and then we'll build a confidence that we have it. And next time you'll know to trust me, and I'll trust you more. And if I say there's more here, there's going to be more. Let's get it. And so, but I have to articulate that. So even if I'm showing I care, I also have to back that up with my words so they hear it, see it, feel it all together. And then they're like, okay, I'll trust you. I'll take a leap of faith with you. And it takes a while to build. It takes a while to build that, but once you have that, it's truly gratifying, because then they'll hit that PR, or they'll run it faster, or they'll run better. And then selfishly, I'm rewarded. I feel good. I went home.
Their success is your success.
Yes, sir. Yes.
I've with the professional athletes I've worked with, I've had a couple that, I mean, all those guys that have been, for me, have been special, but two that specifically stand out for this particular reason is, one was like, Coach, I don't understand what we're doing. I mean, we going through this warm up, we doing all this, and this warm up is harder than the workout. You know what I mean? Why are we warming up so much before we get to getting the work in?
Mm-hmm.
I said, well, the warm up is part of the work. I said, but more importantly than that, I said, I have to find the flaws. You don't pay me to come out here and cheer for you. They look at me like I'm strange,
Mm-hmm.
I said, listen, if you trained with me for 3 months and then you went back and you did your conditioning test for the team and you struggled or you failed, who you blaming?
Right.
So who you going to blame? I said, you're going to blame me.
Coach, yeah.
I said, but you pay me to find the flaws or to get you better. I'm telling you, if you trust me just a little bit, you're going to get better because you can. Now, I'm brutally honest. Hey, look, man, I walked up to one kid and I told him, I said, I call him kid now. He's actually in this profession now. He's actually a professional player. And I said, look, man, there's no way I can make you faster. You're a sub 4.4 guy. So you're running 4.3s every time you hit a 40. I'm not. I'm not going to stand here and look you in the face and tell you I'm going to make you faster. I said, but you can move better.
Mm.
You can be more efficient.
Mm.
You can have the chance of fewer injuries. I said, there's a lot of things I can help you with. But if you want me to promise you that you're going to run a faster 40 than you've ever run, and he told me what his fastest 40 was, 4.36, 4.35, something like that. I said, what? I said, why am I going to stand here and tell you that I'm going to make you faster? So I'm going to make you an Olympic sprinter now.
Nope. That's not the deal, right?
I said, you're fast, man. I said, and for a wide receiver in football, you're as fast as you need to be.
Yeah.
But you could move much better.
That's
so we went to work and it happened. Had a defensive lineman, same way. He recorded that next season. He recorded double-digit sacks, and he was like, oh, man, I just everything we did, he said I could feel it on the field.
Right.
I said, that's why we train.
Mm.
We don't train just to run 140. We don't train to bench press 225 so many times. I said, that's a byproduct of how we're training. If I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, you're going to get faster.
Right.
If you can. If you've left speed on the table, then we're going to get it. But, if you're not as strong as you could be and you stay with me for the requisite amount of time, you're going to be stronger than you were. And I'm just that kind of professional honesty, I think, is not always out there. There's a lot of promises made without the understanding sometimes of, you're not going to take a guy that's 6'6", 320, bench pressing, damn near 600 pounds, and well, man, we're going to get up to 750. Oh, and we might not. I think you need to move a little bit better. Are you strong enough?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're interior defensive lineman, or you're an offensive lineman. Are you strong enough? Now, if you could only bench press 300, well, yeah, I can bench press 300, and we got to get stronger, man.
Yeah.
Those kind of things.
So I talk with these athletes and I say, hey, I'm all about checking these boxes. And I'm like, well, they go, what does that mean? Well, one, I want to make sure we get these things done so we're confident that we can perform because we did enough work. But to your point, if my athlete is a receiver and he's running a mid 4.3s, that box is fully checked.
Yeah,
right?
It's filled in with a big Sharpie.
It is.
I mean,
but I'm going to say, hey, you're running all those routes. Can you do all your routes look the exact same when you start? They should look the exact same so that you can pivot and cut in your route so that you can lose those DBs. If you're fast, but you're already telegraphing where you're going to go, that's a problem. Or maybe you run great routes and you're fast, so you can check both those boxes, but just that you dropping balls, right? Or you can't catch over your left shoulder, right? So I got to look for areas and check another box. So if I said, hey, dude, what's it take to be an all-pro or an all-American receiver? And we come up with this list, and they say there's 44 things on that list, and we can check 12. Great. Well, we'll maintain those 12 and those other 32 things we're going to work on and bring those up too, because we want to find where we can make some margin up and make an impact on the parts that we're missing. Right.
In a 2-minute drill, can you stay on the field?
Right. You're right. If you're fast, but you're already gassed after 2 routes, and then what?
Yeah.
Not good.
Well,
right?
Then we got to condition better.
That's it. So yeah,
so
check your boxes and go find the next limiting factor, because that's what the weak link in the chain breaks. Got to find that. And if you can't, then there's a limiting factor by definition. Bring that up.
Right. There's a lot of things, man, that we do as professionals in the strength training realm and in the weight room that are things other than but important to training.
Oh yeah, 100%.
If I said that to make any sense, a lot of times I've walked in the weight room sometimes in my own place, and I walk in and it's just there's a certain air of excitement, in the room when everybody's got it going. But when the whole room is flat and you have a team training session, mental day. Now we're going to talk. Does that mean we're not going to do anything physically? No.
Mm-hmm.
It just means we're gonna have a mental day. We're gonna challenge ourselves a little bit different. We may not be going for the fastest rep or the most weight or whatever the case may be. We might be looking for the perfect execution. And I'm not going to judge that. You are.
Gotcha.
And the final judge of that perfect execution is the executor. The person that executes that bench press. Tell me about it. How did you feel? What was it? Your best effort? Was it your best execution? It make you think about whether or not you're working with the intent. You should. I use that word a lot because
I like that.
because to me it's just as important as intensity.
Right.
If you come in and your intent is to get through the workout, well, it's going to be a long day.
Sure is. Yep.
So
I had another question. Unless Lucas, did you have something on that? Are you good?
No, I'm good.
All right. So when you're in that first injury in Germany, right, and the PT is like giving you instructions, hey, this is the route we're going to take, and you're like, hold on, bro, that's not the deal. Like, you have to advocate for yourself.
right.
The question is this: so a lot of younger kids, high school kids, and different school systems are brought up to just keep their heads down and their mouths shut. Do what you're told. You don't know anything, and a lot of times that's true.
Right.
but a lot of times it's not. So, but there is an art to advocating for yourself. So if you're a walk-on in college and you're looked at as nothing, but you really have something to offer, you don't want to go up there and bitch and complain and be that kind of person. But there's an artwork to advocating for yourself where you have a chance to have the coach or the doctor take another look at you and say, okay, I'm going to listen to this person for a minute and see if they can make a valid point. How do you coach those kids? Because they're young, they're not that mature yet, to advocate for themselves with their sports coaches, their football, basketball, soccer coaches, whatever.
First thing I tell the kid is speak for yourself. Don't have your mom or dad come talk to me. Unless if mom and dad have a question that they want answers to, fine. But for something that we're doing here, don't you need to talk to me. So what I want you to do is, as you're training, every time you come in with every one of my athletes, I said, I want, especially like I got a 14-year-old right now. I said, you owe me 5 questions that you have for me at the end of each training day. 5 questions. Now unlike Lucas, I don't have, 7, 8 teams and, 30, 40 kids coming through at a time. So maybe it's 1 question a week that they owe you, but in this instance, you got to ask me 5 questions, and they can be about anything that's related to, past, present, or future training that we're doing.
That's good.
Or something that is related to, how you're taking what we're doing to the field or the court or the pitch or the pool or whatever your sport is. So you ask me those questions, and not one of them is dumb. And the last 5 minutes of each training session, that's what we're doing.
So that teaches them to think critically about what they're doing. It builds into their identity, and then it gives them the opportunity to advocate for themselves and say, "Hey, I have a question about what we're doing here."
Yeah.
So then it gives them some reps, and therefore the confidence to go to their swim coach or hockey coach and be respectful, and then ask things in a dignified manner. So that's an excellent process. I like that a lot. I'm writing that down.
Yeah, you get the opportunity, they get the opportunity to learn to communicate.
Yeah,
I like that a lot.
And for me, what I found out as I, stopped working with or lessened the amount of elite athletes that I worked with, because those guys would ask questions. They're advocating for themselves, because if they're pros, it's about, the bottom line is their money.
right.
So they're going to ask the question because they know their body is what makes them money. If they're in college athletes, they're trying to get better because they're either trying to get on the field or they're trying to get to the next level. So while they're not as good as the pros at asking the questions, they are at least having the conversation. The younger athletes, they may not be getting something you said. I watched a young lady go all the way through a training session, and I'm in the high school and I'm new. And she goes all the way through the training session. And I asked the coach, I said, Coach, she doesn't look like she's, well, she just, that's all she does. I said, was she doing her reps? She says, yeah, well, she does them, but she could be better. I said, well, have you talked to her about it? No. I said, well, why not? Well, because she thinks I'm yelling at her. I said, well, are you?
Right.
Are you yelling at her? And of course he said, no, I'm not yelling at her. He said, I might be kind of loud or whatever, but she was shy. So I just kind of walk over to her and I said, what are you not understanding? That's all I asked her. I said, what are you not understanding about how we're training?
That's it, right?
She's like, well, I don't really know why we do this, or I don't really understand this or that. And she's 14, 15 years old. So I explained to her, this is why we do it. Yep. And this is why we do it. And this is why we do it. The next day she walks in the next training session. I think that was 3 days later, like a Thursday, when we came back to the same things. And I walked in there. He said, what'd you say to her? I said, I asked her what she didn't understand.
Right.
He's like, what? I said, I asked her what she didn't understand. She's not going to come to you. Especially, she was intimidated in the weight room anyway, because she was a female and the guys were in there, the weights were clanging around, and she's part of a volleyball team, so there's just a few females in there at that period, 5 or 6, and 2 or 3 of them were seniors, and the other ones, she was a sophomore, freshman, she was younger, and she just didn't get it.
Sure,
she just didn't know. So
it's kind of, I do something sort of like that at the school I work at. Sometimes after maybe a couple weeks of training or we're getting through a block, sometimes I'll kind of stop what we're doing and kind of give them the floor to talk. Um,
Yeah.
you know, they hear me talk every day and instructing, or they hear me yelling or coach anything that it could be. They're always
Right.
hearing me, so I put it on them sometimes and say, hey, we'll gather up as a group, we'll kind of circle around and talk for a minute and just say, hey, what kind of questions, thoughts, questions and concerns do you have about what we're doing? Anything you don't understand? Anything, I ask them just straight up, what can I do better? Anything that you can come up with that I can do better, because I'm the one that you're listening to. I'm the one that's instructing you. You're the one getting information from me. So how can I make that better? And a lot of times, a lot of people are, sometimes I have to really dig it out of them and,
Right.
really
Or
think
they
about.
come to you afterwards and say, well, I really did have a question
Sure.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
about X.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's
And
pretty typical for that age.
just being able to give them a chance to kind of voice what they think and how they feel about what it is that we're doing in the weight room, how it is to be coached by me. And it's good for me because it helps me learn and kind of grow and how to, kind of coach a kid better, and that's whenever I have conversations, I'll have conversations with, I had a conversation with a kid today and I said, there's just something that's not clicking right now. And, what can I do? What do I need to do better for you so that you can you can learn this and understand this and, you know, we can continue to progress forward. What is it that I need to do? And I think a lot of times when you ask them, what can I do better? They kind of just don't know they don't know how
Right.
to respond to an adult, the coach to a kid. What can I do better? Sometimes they have to think about it for a second because they're never really presented with that kind of thought process or critical thinking and stuff. So it's, it helps me. And when I tell them it helps me to get better so I can be a better coach for you, then that also kind of helps build trust and it
Right.
shows that you do care about this stuff. So
I tell you what, man, I was really fortunate in high school with the coaches that I came up with because they talked to us.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really fortunate in college because the coaches that I had, they talked to us. And they made it a point to talk to us. They weren't unreachable or untouchable. They made it a point to talk to us, and they made it, um, uh, where unless they were in a meeting or something, the coach's office door was always open, and I literally mean the door was open, and it was a glass window. They didn't have an office tucked away with a closed door you never saw. You saw them all the time.
yeah,
You,
that's
you
exactly how my office is.
and
Doors always open.
one of the best things that I think that I carry around with me, uh, professionally doing this kind of stuff is include everybody. Because sometimes I would just walk out of my facility, when I had my own facility. I'd walk out and kind of let them finish up with the cool down or whatever, and I noticed mom or dad were there, and I would just walk out and say, "You guys got any questions? You talking to them? What are they saying at home?" I'd get feedback from there, and they'll go, "Oh, well, um, sometimes they come up with a question, sometimes they didn't. But the next time when I walk out and ask, they had a question.
That's awesome.
Because a lot of guys separate themselves from the parents when they're training the kids, when they're training the young kids. They never talk to the parents, never. I'm like, well, I mean, dad was a college athlete. Well, how does he feel about what you're doing? Doesn't mean you're going to change it. Just
Right.
how does he feel about what you're doing? What does he see? What are his expectations? Mom is an administrator in a business downtown. What does she feel? Excuse
there's
me,
this.
guys. Hang on. I'm sorry.
Sure.
Can you let him outside? Go.
That happens, man. I got 4 dogs, so
I super duper apologize for that.
Very
But
fun.
he was getting ready to pee on my floor. I know it.
that's an interesting point. There's some kids or people you've trained, and you could say, turn left right now and start walking, and they would do it, right? Because they trust you and they believe in what you've told them. You've built that relationship and trust. And then there's the opposite, where you're dealing with someone brand new. They don't know you from Adam, and they're like, well, who's this guy? And you can just look, if you look at me, I'm all this white beard. Luca's got this, and he looks like he's 16 sometimes, 18 years old. Like, what's this kid know, right? He don't know anything, right? So you're at the two opposite ends of the spectrum. When they totally believe in everything you say, you just give them the next instruction and they go. When they don't, then you got to build that buy-in by explaining more. Here's why we're doing it this way. This is why it makes sense. So they start saying, oh, okay, makes sense. It's logical. It builds confidence. And then this next rep occurs, just like you said. And it's like, all right, well, coach's not an idiot. I'm going to believe him a little bit more. And 6 months or 6 years later, it's like, all right, coach is all right. Coach is not an idiot. All right, got it.
Yeah, that confidence, gaining that confidence is one of the things as a practitioner and as a coach in an institutional setting, critical.
Critical. Yes. Critical. Yeah, that's the word.
Just critical. I mean, if you have your own shop like you do, Jim, you don't eat if you don't gain some confidence from somebody.
Sure. Right.
And it can't be fake, because kids and especially athletes are the first ones that figure out when you're full of shit.
Yeah, they smell it.
When you either don't know what you're talking about, or you're feeding them a line of crap or whatever, they know it, and it's almost immediate.
You can further build their confidence when you don't know shit by saying, I don't know shit in this instance. I'm going to find this out immediately. That's a great question. And then they're like, all right, this guy's still going to be honest, high integrity. He's going to do right by me. He comes back to me later. So he's not perfect. He doesn't know everything perfectly, which thank God I've never professed that I am. But
I've walked.
If you come back later with the answer, I'm like, hey, here's what we're doing and why. And that was a good question. We'll make a little adjustment. Confidence continues to grow. The relationship improves. But when you start faking things, which is, quasi lie, integrity breaks a little bit there. Then it's like, oh shit. Nope.
I walked a female athlete back to my office one time, got on the phone with another strength coach who happened to be a female, because I was talking about something, and I said something, and she kind of squinted. I said, you don't believe me? And she said, well, what about X, whatever it was? I said, you know what? You just asked a question that may be over my head.
Right.
I said, but let's go get the answer. And she was like, what? I said, let's go get the answer. I know somebody who likely knows. Went back to my office, made that call, put it on speaker, told my one of my peers who I had standing there and what questions she had. And she said, hey, that's a great question. She said, give me a second. And she was gone about 2-3 minutes. And she came back with another trainer, with another strength coach, and said, she knows.
So I don't need to be the smartest one in the room. I just got to know some other smart folks and bring them along.
Yeah, but the end of the end point on that is that girl ended up, I mean, she trained with me for 12, 13 years. She ended up getting into this profession, and now she's out there doing her thing. But she ended up in that instance one of my most faithful followers.
Sure.
And I say it like that because she would say to new girls that were coming in, or somebody that she brought in, he can find out if you need to know, or if he doesn't already know, he's going to do this and this. And she made the sales pitch for me in that instance.
That's awesome.
So we got to keep eating. Anyway, I can talk all day, guys.
One of the last pieces from that first story, because there's so many lessons there, is that Trevor Moawad's book, It Takes What It Takes. When the PT or a coach says, hey, here's our training session. But the athlete wants to progress even more, or even maybe he does the training session and they're still not where the athlete wants to be. And say, well, you know what? I'm progressing. I'm getting better. I'm moving up the depth chart, but I want to play in college and I know that I'm not there yet. It's going to take more. So when you want to get off that rehab with a crutch or with a cane, it's going to take more than what those PTs told you to do. And sometimes athletes, they'll need more. How do you work with those kids that say, hey, man, you came to me, you said you want to play in college. We're not starting in JV yet. It's going to take more than what we're doing right now to get there. Are you willing to do that? How do those conversations go? What are some practices you do with that?
Okay, I had this question. This is a real life scenario, so I'm leaving all names out. I won't even say the sport. But coach, I want to play in college. Okay. What do I need to do? You need to get better at your sport. That was my answer. You need to get better at your sport. Well, that's why I'm here. I said, no, you're here to get your body better so that you can perform physically at a high level. Understand what you're asking for. So I can help you with this side. What you need to do is find a skills coach who can help you with the other side. And then you need to give him the same or her the same commitment, consistency, and persistence that you give to your body. Your body's 365 days a year, 24/7. You have to, when you're an athlete in today's athletic climate, you have to be paying attention to it all the time, from the time you're, depending on what level you're competing at, but definitely from the time you're 18 up.
Yep.
But if you're a child prodigy in tennis or a sport like that and you're 14 or 15, well, it's from 14 or 15 up. Your body is something that you're concerned with 365 days a year, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts. Now, once you put that in the toolkit, ask yourself, how much time do I need to devote to the skill and tactical part of my
profession,
my goals and my wishes.
Yep.
And then the part you really have to ask is, do I want to commit?
Because once you say yes, I want to commit, most other decisions go away. You don't get to decide about staying out late because that decision's already been made. I decided to commit. It means I go to bed at this time.
Yeah.
I don't miss a training session. I don't miss this meal.
Yeah.
I get, this many ounces of water. Once you make that I commit decision, all the other ones are gone.
Yeah.
Because you're gonna play at that level then.
Commitment's not a level.
Right.
Commitment's either you're in or you're out. You're either fully committed or you're not.
Amen.
Now I know some guys who can get there being halfway committed.
Sure.
And some athletes who can be, that's enough. That's good enough. But good enough, in the end, good enough is never good, and it's never enough.
Yes.
That's awesome. In the end, that's what it is. That's good enough. Well, okay. If you think that's good enough, I can't make you stay and finish, these last reps. I've had athletes walk out on me. Completely walk out. Somebody said, "Why would you tell people that?" Well, because I'm not perfect. And I've had athletes leave because they thought either I was working them too hard or that I didn't know what I was doing or whatever the case may be. But out of all these years, I'd say probably out of the 12 or 15 athletes that, say, you're full of shit. I'd say 2/3 of them ended up coming back in training with me at a later time because they went off somewhere else. And I was the only one that would take them back after, getting
a little breakup.
After getting the backhand. So I take them back, but taking them back was, are you committed?
Yeah.
That's the question. Are you committed? Because if you're not committed and you're going to pull that again, I ain't got time for that. Because I'm going to give you everything I know how to give you. Everything I know. And I can only guarantee you one thing is I'm going to give you my best. If you don't think my best is good enough, that's your prerogative.
Gotcha.
But I'm going to give it to you.
I got a bunch of rapid fire questions, but I got one more little one before then.
Okay.
Your podcast, Performance Talk.
Yes.
If I ask you, hey man, mission statement, what are you looking to accomplish there? What's the why behind that? Because people's whys is always intriguing to me. Unless some people say, I want to build this up so I make a bunch of money. I want the notoriety, blah, blah, blah. Tell me, since you created this from nothing and you're over 150 episodes in, that's why that, you said, well, I'm 60, I'm probably never going to retire. What's keeping you going? Why are we still doing this?
Why not?
Well, why not's an okay answer, but it doesn't tell me.
It doesn't tell you. Here's why I say why not. Because I could say because I want to give back. That's part of the reason.
Okay.
I could say because when I started this, nobody was doing a podcast quite like that one.
True.
They were a lot more technical because nobody's doing it. So I could say that. Or I could say, like you said, I want to make a lot of money. Well, that ain't happening.
Right.
That hasn't happened.
It could be a whole bunch of those things.
But it's a lot of that. But I say why not? Because the why not is why not do something that allows you to stay relevant and active in your profession, in a profession that you love, if you love it.
Right.
So why not?
All right.
Because I want to stay relevant and I want to stay active in the profession and I want to talk to guys like, dang man, how did I forget you? That's being old. Luke, what's your name, man?
Lucas?
Yeah, okay. I was getting ready to call you something else. Different.
That's all right.
Nah. Anyway, I want to talk to guys like Lucas and be relevant. I want him to go, oh, this old son of a gun.
Right.
He's stuck in the 70s, or stuck in the 90s. I don't want him to say that. But I want him to know that, look, I feel like I have something to give you, and it's not always the you have to do this, and this. It is for me, it's the other side of that page, right? It's that side that side that's saying, hey, what's it really like over here? What really happens in this profession? So that's the why not. I knew you were going to say that though, Jim.
All right.
I knew you were going to go, oh man, that's the cop out. But it's why not.
Perfect. Love it. Really enjoyed our time. Learned a lot. I wrote down some excellent notes I'm going to implement immediately. My coaches meeting is this coming Monday with our coaches, so I'm going to talk to them about those questions. I know we can find you at Ground Level 4 online. I know we can find you with the Performance Talk podcast. When you train, when you running or lifting, whatever, what's music? What's something you like to listen to?
Okay, so when I'm in the weight room, just the clanging of the bars, dumbbells hitting the floor. I don't really listen to music.
Yep.
I've been that way since I was young. I'd go in the weight room in college. The one we had I called it the boiler room because it seemed it was in the basement of an old building. I'd go in there. Nothing. That was it. Now people would come in after me and turn on music and stuff like that.
Sure.
That didn't bother me. But mine was just, hey, this is what I do.
You listen when I said, what's your bucket list adventure? You said you're already doing it.
I'm doing it, yeah.
A lot of sports movies. Anyone in particular you like or a couple you like? Sports movies, or you don't watch them at all, or you like too many?
The one that pops to mind every time everybody asks me is the old Longest Yard.
Oh, yeah, with Burt Reynolds.
With Burt Reynolds.
4-3 Mama.
Yeah, I just
Clotheslining
laughed.
the guy was the name of the
I just
play they
laughed all
called
the
it.
way through it.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
I just, a lot of people that knew me, especially when I was younger, they said that guy never smiles, but I'd laugh at that.
yeah, that's good.
I would laugh from deep down in my soul at that every time. So,
Favorite sport to watch?
football.
Favorite athlete to watch?
Don't really have one that's playing or even living now, but I used to like to watch Walter Payton.
Sweetness.
Yep, Sweetness.
Right. What's a good book for us to read that you'd recommend?
I don't know, man. I'd have to think about that. The Bill Walsh book.
Gotcha.
Let me see if I can see it from here. On my shelf. Genius, is it? Might be.
Gotcha.
But it's by Bill Walsh. When they had the 49ers dynasty back then.
Who's a hero of yours? And it could be like something you like. It's silly, like a superhero, like Superman, or your hero could be your father or someone else in a book. But what's a superhero?
Well, if it's a superhero, Batman.
My man.
Because he just Batman was just he did his thing, and he was just a dude.
Yep.
Rich dude, but he was just a dude.
How about a villain?
Deadshot.
All right. Favorite lift in the gym to do?
Bench press.
Okay.
Followed closely by the squat.
My man. I know you said that if you had all the money in the world, you keep doing what you're doing. And I liked your quote, and it ties into that one of the final questions by that George Bernard Shaw. Some men see things as they are and ask why. I dream of things that never were and ask why not. So explain that real well to us. And
I'll explain it to you like this. When I was in Columbia, South Carolina, my daughter played soccer, and I was thinking about getting into at a pro-am level or whatever level, just, owning a sports team. It was indoor football. It was a hockey team. They had a hockey team down there, and I talked to those guys a little bit. And then I said, why not a women's soccer team? And so I started asking around, and there was a market for it, and they were playing. And it's just everything. And I had everybody that could have helped me stand that up, tell me it'll never work. It'll never work. It's not going to happen. That's not. And then when it happened, and we built a team there, and the team ended up in the Final Four 3 years later, and playing for a national championship in the USL. And we built it from nothing, absolutely nothing. I damn near went broke doing it. But they told me it couldn't be done. The ironic thing is, the same people that told me it couldn't be done and it wasn't any good, they wanted to buy the team from me later on.
Yeah. Everyone says no, and then they say, wow, how'd you do that? And then they say, I want to be part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. How did you do it? And the weird thing about it is I would have welcomed them, but they weren't serious about, they weren't serious from my perspective about, one, buying the team for what it was going to be worth. They weren't serious about that. Two, they just wanted it to get it away from me and put it under their umbrella.
Sure.
This is a big. Well, to be honest, it's a soccer club that could have made it.
Yeah.
We could have really taken that thing a long way, but they wanted the whole thing. They didn't want the team that I had put together to be part of any of it. They wanted to just take it over, bring in all their people. Okay, well, maybe now what I love about it is that same organization hired the coach that I hired as the head coach that took the team to the championship to work as one of their coaches in one of their pieces. So, it was one of those things where I was all for it if it was going to be better for the team. But at that particular juncture, I didn't feel like it was going to be better for the team. It was just get it out of his hands.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way it felt. So
With that approach, when you're looking for help and people say no or you can't, be on the lookout. So I'm publishing this book that'll come out in September, and the dedication on the first few pages of the book aligns with what you're talking about. So it's basically dedicated to all those who've ever been told no, including myself. This is how you show yes you can. So
I don't think anything's impossible when we work together.
Damn right. You'll really enjoyed it. Everybody check him out on the Performance Talk podcast and the Ground Level 4 down in Texas. Reach out to him on all social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. You'll find him everywhere. You'll really enjoyed it. For those that are listening, you want to get a hold of us, you have questions, info@athlete-builder.com. Just like Ewell said, he asks his athletes to come up with questions, 5 of them at the end of this training session. So if you're a listener, you should have a question or two that you're trying to get better with that answer. Send that to us so we can help you get better. This is all we really care about, So again, Ewell, thanks for the time. Very generous with your knowledge, experiences. I learned a lot. Man, 90% of these questions I asked, I really didn't know the answer. And I usually like to know the answers in advance. So really learned a lot, and it went well. I'm very impressed with your service. Thank you for that. Thank you for your sacrifice. And then what you continue to do beyond the military with young and older athletes. You've done what we try to do. You've made an impact, and that's important. That's what we care about. So thank you.
Well, guys, thanks for having me on. Appreciate your time. Keep doing what you're doing.
Yes, sir. Thank you.